Hey kids, let's talk about the good old days growing up in Idaho.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Growing Up in Idaho. Today we're going to go back to the good old days again with Mike Hicks talking about his police stories from the 1960s.
Well, okay, here we go. I was, one time I was running the radio desk, the dispatcher desk in the sheriff's office. And
So tell us a little bit about that, Dad, before you jump into your story. Nowadays, most police departments have professional dispatch offices where full-time dispatchers run those radios and phones. How was it back in your day?
Well, in my day, we had, in the sheriff's office, we had a special radio.
Hey kids, let's talk about the good old days growing up in Idaho.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Growing Up in Idaho. Today we're going to go back to the good old days again with Mike Hicks talking about his police stories from the 1960s.
Well, okay, here we go. I was, one time I was running the radio desk, the dispatcher desk in the sheriff's office. And
So tell us a little bit about that, Dad, before you jump into your story. Nowadays, most police departments have professional dispatch offices where full-time dispatchers run those radios and phones. How was it back in your day?
Well, in my day, we had, in the sheriff's office, we had a special radio room where someone would, we all took our turns. Well, not everybody, but 3 or 4 guys in our department that had the ability to do it, the skills to run that and would sit at that desk and at the radio and several telephones in front of them and take calls as they came in. It could be any kind of a call, from a car wreck to a family fight to you name it. And then we knew where all the cars were out there in the county traveling around, and we'd dispatch cars to these situations. And that's called the dispatching office. And I had to turn at that every once in a while because I knew how to do it and could do it. And
so could you explain a little bit? I've ran a dispatching office before where we had really top-notch computers. How did you do it before the days of computer in keeping track of all of your cars and where that? Did you have a grid or did you just write it down? What was your method?
We had a big sheet in front of us with the car numbers, and it was cordoned off in columns. And so whenever somebody was on a call, we could make a note on that and immediately refer to it there in front of us to see where that car was and what they were doing. And of course, the officers out there in the cars, when they got finished with a particular situation, they'd always come in and call in on the radio and tell you that that was over and they were back on patrol or whatever they were doing. So we always knew where our men were and what they were doing and whether or not they were available for a call to be given a call. So that's kind of how we did it. It was all with pencil and paper and radio, and you're right, there were no computers and fancy stuff. And but it worked well. It was very effective. And we always had about 7 cars out, because in those days the county wasn't so populated as it is nowadays. I'm sure they have a lot more cars, but we'd have about 7 cars out at any one time. So you just had to keep track of those 7 cars. And then there was always a few state police officer cars out. And then Meridian and Boise and different places also had police cars on the road all the time.
Those
so
were
we'd coordinate with
city
those
police.
other dispatchers. Yeah. The dispatchers in those other cities, we'd coordinate with them whenever we needed more help, or whenever they needed more help, they'd call us. So anyway, that's kind of how it worked. We just kind of keep track of it. And that was the point. In the reason that not everybody could do that, because not everybody could keep track of all of that without going nuts. Sometimes when you get something big happening, there's a lot of high tension and pressure, and you got to be able to keep your wits about you if you're going to be a dispatcher in a high tension situation. So anyway, that's how it worked.
Interesting.
Okay, you ready for the story?
Let's go.
Okay, I was dispatching one night, and it was the night before Christmas. It was Christmas Eve, and I got a call on the telephone from this guy. I won't use his name, and I, picked the phone up and said, "Good evening, Ada County Sheriff's Department. Can I help you?" And this guy started cussing at me, ranting and raving, and that happened occasionally. Some drunk or some irate person or something, and I'd just hang up on him. Well, I hung up, and within a few seconds, the phone rang again, and I picked it up. Same guy, still carrying on. And the third time that I picked it up, I said, "Who is this?" Because I never thought he'd ever tell me his name, but this guy did. He must have been pretty drunk or pretty mad, because he told me his name. And I said, "Well, you're going to jail." And in those days, and I'm sure there's still a law now that says you cannot use the telephone to annoy another person. If you call somebody you don't like up and start cussing at them on the phone, they can have you arrested for it. It's against the law. And if you happen to be in an emergency office of some kind, like a police dispatcher or a fire department dispatcher or somewhere like that, and you're taking up that valuable time with this kind of stuff, not only is it a misdemeanor, but it's what's called an indictable misdemeanor, which means you can go to jail for 90 days for doing that. So anyway, I told the guy, "You're in jail. I'll be coming to get you," when he told me his name. The minute I heard his name, I knew who he was, because he was kind of had a reputation. Anyway, he hung up and I hung up, and I never heard from him again that night. And because the next day was Christmas, I let it ride for a day. But the day after Christmas, 26th of December, myself and another officer, and the other officer was a guy named Bud Zarbniski. And Bud was a former football player for Boise State, and not a very big guy, about 6 foot and about 190 pounds, which in those days was pretty good size. But Bud was a good guy to have with you in a situation where you needed some good backup. So I got Bud. He was on duty that night, and I was on duty, and we went over there to this guy's house, and it was just crazy. I knocked on the door, and the guy opened the door, and when he saw 2 police officers standing on the doorstep, he knew the jig was up. He knew I was serious the night before, a couple of nights before, when I told him, "You're going to jail." And he saw us there, and he whirled and ran across the room. And across the room was a deer horn, rack of deer horns. And hanging from those horns, from those antlers, was a gun belt with a pistol in the holster. Well, I saw what was coming. He was heading for that gun. And I ran as quick as I could. In those days, I was probably faster than I am now. Anyway, I caught him before he got to the gun and grabbed him by the back of his shirt and jerked him around. And he turned around fighting mad. The fight was on. And so here I was fighting with this guy, and Zarbniski come to help me get him under control so we could handcuff him. And the guy's mother and dad were a couple of immigrants from Germany, and they had left Germany in the wake of World War II, and they were, in their 60s or so, something like that. And they both went nuts because they didn't speak very much English, and they didn't know what was going on. And they obviously didn't know what this was all about. And the old lady, a big heavy lady, probably weighed 250, grabbed a big glass ashtray and come over and start beating on my head with it. But fortunately, I had my helmet on, so it wasn't really hurting me. But it was such a high tension, high energy situation that I whirled around and gave her a big push, put my hand right on her chest and give her a push. And I pushed her pretty hard, and she did a somersault backwards and landed on the floor over there. And that took her out of the fight. She didn't get up again. She sat there with her eyes about as big as saucers watching the whole thing. And I turned back to this guy, and he wouldn't give up. The old man was running around the house screaming, Gestapo, Gestapo, Gestapo. And
Yeah.
anyway, that was when I pulled my mace out and I sprayed the guy. And that took the fight out of him. But in the process, because there was so much action going on, that the mace, the spray, got on everybody. And so we were all kind of running in our eyes, but he got it directly in the face. So we got him handcuffed. And somebody called for backup. And so the city police, this was in Boise City, the city police showed up and they came in there. And no, not the city, Garden City police showed up. And they had an officer named Tim Sheffield. And Tim was about 6 feet tall and weighed about 350. Huge guy. And he come in there and he got all excited. And he took his mace out and he sprayed everybody, and even the dog. Anyway, it was an exciting time. We finally got the guy arrested and took him in, and he ended up doing 60 days in jail for all of that. And that was the last I ever heard of him. I guess he may have learned his lesson. He stayed out of trouble after that, as far as I know.
Nice.
It was a pretty exciting time. Looking back on it, it was pretty funny, but at the time it was not too funny because there was a gun hanging there, and if one of those people would have got their hands on it, somebody would have got killed, most likely.
That's dangerous business. Any domestic issue is going to, when you step into someone's house, their domain.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. In fact, in the hierarchy of dangerous calls, family fight is what we used to call them in those days, was the most dangerous domestic call, or any kind of call.
Yeah.
Because you go out, a woman gets mad at her husband and calls the police. The police show up and the woman changes sides and runs in the bedroom and gets a gun and comes out and shoots you. And that's a scenario that is not all that infrequent.
Yeah.
So it's kind of spooky. Yeah. Anyway, that was one of the exciting, fun stories, and kind of a dumb story, but at the time it wasn't dumb. It was pretty serious stuff.
Yeah. Well, it's good to know. We used to make prank phone calls all the time when I was a kid. Yeah. I'm sure in fact, I know for sure we weren't thinking about going to jail. We were just having fun. And we used to call a lot of people. And we always had our favorite little scenarios,
Oh, sure.
But,
like this Main Street, go by your place, we'll run out and get it, will you?
Yeah.
Things like that, yeah.
Yeah. Prince Albert in a can.
Yeah. Yeah, those kind of dumb things. But the point is, I suppose the law still exists. I'm sure laws have changed a lot since my day, but I'm sure that's still against the law.
Yeah.
To use the telephone to annoy is a misdemeanor crime. You can get 30 days in jail and a $300 fine for it. And those days, the reason he got 60 days, or was it? Yeah, 60 days, is because it was to an emergency office, a police department, that he made the call. And so,
yeah, it's interesting.
That made it a more serious crime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what other action stories do you have? I remember a lot of stories. In fact, for our listeners, you have to know that that when I was in 7th grade and 8th grade, I had my dad as a teacher in junior high school before he became a principal later on. And us kids in his classes had some methods of avoiding work. And one of them was to get Dad going on his police stories, because as soon as that happened, there was always less work to do, less assignments, where we could postpone things until the next day. We had our little ways of getting out of doing work.
Yeah. Well, another thing about that issue, though, is what the kids may not figure it out is that I would tell them on Monday, if everybody's good this week and there's no problems, nobody's sent to the office, nobody gets in trouble, then Friday, the last half hour of class, we'll have police stories.
Yeah.
So that always worked because the good kids would tell the other kids to shut up and behave. I want to hear some stories.
That's right.
It worked both ways. It was fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. I remember those days. They were good days.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, another story.
Yeah.
Okay. There was this guy, and again, I guess I won't use his name. You'd have to be a little bit familiar with the geography around Boise, but from a little town called Mountain Home to Boise is about 40 miles. And it's a straight freeway. But just before you get to Boise, in those days, it's changed now. They've rebuilt the road. But in those days, the freeway ended about 5 miles out of Boise and came down to a 2-lane road. So you had to drive a 2-lane on into town because they hadn't updated the freeway yet. Well, there was this guy that went over to Mountain Home and got drunk. And he was coming back to Boise and he was driving about 100 miles an hour and drunk, drinking beer. And he came up behind an old man and his grandson in a pickup, and they were pulling a little travel trailer along behind the pickup. And it was at night and it was dark. And this drunk guy was coming so fast that he didn't see what was in front of him because the old camper trailer had lights on it. They did work. They were there. But they were pretty dim, I suppose, because, Anyway, he ran right into the back of that trailer and he drove right through the trailer and hit the truck and knocked it off the road. And as the truck rolled off the road, the old man fell out and the truck slid over him and killed him. Well, I got the call to go and investigate this. And so I got there, and there the drunk guy was standing around. He wasn't hurt at all. And the little boy, about a 10-year-old kid, was not hurt either. But he was just petrified and horrified that his grandpa was hurt so bad. Anyway, I got there and started taking care of things. And the guy that had done it, he got arrested, of course, and I went and locked him in the back of the police car. Those police cars, as I told you the other day in the interview, they had plexiglass screens between the front and back seat, and then the doors had no door handles on the inside. You couldn't open the back doors except from the outside. So you put somebody in there in handcuffs, which he was, and they're trapped. The only way they could get out is to kick out a window and then crawl out. That'd be pretty hard with your hands cuffed behind you, back. So he was sitting in the car, and we were taking care of the wreck and cleaning things up and called the ambulance and so on and so forth. And it was a bad situation, really bad situation. This little boy was just so distraught, and he probably to this day still has nightmares about Grandpa and this bad car wreck and everything. Well, one of our detectives came by and just to see what was going on, and I had him take the guy in and lock him in the holding cell at the sheriff's office, and I'd go in later and book him. So he did that, and I cleaned the wreck up and got the ambulance all cleared up and everything. And in the process of all of this, when things slowed down a little, the road was blocked because of the wreckage. And I went around the crowd and got the names of several people. And that's how I knew how fast this guy was going. Later on in court, I had a guy sit there on the witness stand and testify that I was coming back from a fishing trip, me and my friend here, and we were going 90 miles an hour, and this guy passed us like we were sitting still. Well, that's pretty good evidence that this guy was speeding, which he claimed he was only going 55.
Right.
But I also got a blood alcohol thing on him, and he was way, way drunk. I forgot the numbers anymore, but he was very drunk. Anyway, we had a trial, and it was a manslaughter trial because he'd killed this old man. and he was found guilty, and he went to prison for 5 years for it. But that's the reason that drunk drivers and reckless drivers in those days, and I'm assuming it's still the same, are taken off the road. They're not allowed to get back in their car and drive away, especially the drunks, but reckless drivers too. Reckless driving is when you're driving at a speed or in such a manner that endangers lives and property of other people, including yourself. So if somebody's weaving down the road mad or angry, or mad at their wife, or going over to a certain number of miles over the speed limit, you can arrest them for reckless driving and throw them in jail.
Yeah.
Which we often did. So that's what that was all about. Anyway, he did 5 years in prison, and he lost his driver's license till he was 30 years old or something. I can't remember.
It's a tough lesson to learn.
Well, I'm not sure he learned it, but
yeah, a lot of times that's the case.
He was pretty arrogant through the whole thing. 5 years in prison might have helped. I don't know for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, it's too bad. The tough thing about situations like that is someone lost their life, an innocent person.
Yeah.
And the drunk person who caused the whole thing walked away.
Yeah.
And that happens so often.
Yeah. And all the way through the process of arresting him and putting him in jail and later in the trial and everything else, he just had an attitude like, I was only going 60 at the most, and
Yeah.
This officer's wrong, and Well, of course, the jury didn't believe any of that baloney. I had lots of good evidence that, I even had the empty beer bottles in his car that still had liquid in them.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, justice doesn't always match up in cases like that. If justice was perfect, that guy would have lost his life and everybody else would have lived.
yeah,
But that's not always going to happen.
not the way it always works. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. But anyway, those were a couple of interesting things that happened. And
I remember a story, Dad, you told about a guy who ran a fence post through him. How did that all turn out?
oh, yeah, okay. It was out on the county road towards Star and Cuna Road, actually. And this guy ran off the road. He wasn't drunk or anything. He just was at night, and he just simply ran off the road. And I got a call to go out there. There was wreckage, and there was there was blood everywhere. But the person that called it in says, I can't find anybody, but there's blood everywhere. Somebody must have picked this guy up. So I went out to the wreck. Sure enough, there was blood everywhere, and nobody around. Car was smashed into it. It hit a whole line of fence. It had gone off the road and hit a bunch of fence posts. And it was those jack fences, that are, anyway, they were broken all down. And it was obvious that some of those fence posts had come through his windshield.
Yeah.
That's where the blood was. Well, I was standing there with my flashlight shining around looking for the body. There has to be a body here somewhere.
Yeah.
And I heard this crunch, crunch, crunching in the gravel on the side of the road behind me. And I turn around and shine my light up there. And here come this guy walking down the side of the road with a fence post stuck through him. And it went under one arm and out the other arm. So it was like a scarecrow. And what had happened is that it was a small split rail post, thank goodness. Had it been a full-size post, it would have done him in. But it was a split rail, which means you take a regular fence post and cut it into fourths. So it was a fourth of a post, which meant it was about 3x3 size post.
Yeah.
And it had pushed his chest bones in and stretched his skin out, his breast skin out over that post. And he was holding it up. And he was wide awake and cognizant. And I said, "Whoa, that's got to hurt." And he said, he cussed and said, "It really does hurt." I got him to sit down and hold still until the ambulance came. And when the ambulance got there, we couldn't get him in the police car because the post was too long.
Yeah.
I mean, in the ambulance, couldn't get him in, and he couldn't lay down or he'd probably suffocate. So somebody, the rancher nearby there, came over with a saw, and we held that post as steady as we could while he sawed the ends off. And they hauled the guy away in the ambulance with just about 1.5 inches on each side of his chest, a post still sticking out.
Wow.
And I cleaned the wreck up and then went into the hospital. And when I got there, you always go to the hospital to see how the guy is doing,
Yeah.
That's just standard procedure. When I got there, they had him in surgery, of course, and they'd removed the post. And the doctor came out and talked to me and said he's going to be fine. He's got a broken sternum, which is that bone there, and a few broken ribs, but he's going to live. His heart and his lungs are okay. Can't see any damage to them. But that guy was leading a charmed life to get away with that without dying.
Yeah, you think of all of the circumstances surrounding that. Any little move, right or left would have probably speared him through his organs. That's crazy.
Yeah, incredible luck. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind the Lord was looking out for the guy. I think what happened is he fell asleep. It was late at night.
Yeah.
He fell asleep and ran off and hit this row of fence row. And
wow.
Anyway.
Yeah, just to have him up walking around is pretty amazing. He must have been tough.
He was a tough guy. And I got another story to tell you about a tough guy. I got a call of a car wreck and I got out there to the scene, and the road out there in the country had these dips, go up and down dips. And this guy come up over a dip a little too fast and lost control, and it was a pickup, and he flipped his pickup upside down in the middle of the road, and out in the grass and the weeds on the side of the road, actually. And I got there, and because the truck was upside down, the gasoline was running out of the tank all over, and there was just this powerful smell of gas. And we were down in the bottom of one of those dips, and as I come over the top, I could smell the gas immediately in the air, the fumes. And police cars had spark arresters on them so that gasoline wouldn't ignite them. But I called for backup, and they stopped all the traffic. So here we were on the bottom of this swale with me and the police car and this guy under the car, and I could see his feet sticking out from under the truck there. And he was moving his feet, and I said, "You okay? Yeah, you okay?" Yeah, I'm fine. I'm just stuck under here. I can't get out." And I said, "Well, we'll get you out. Just hang in there." And so I got down on my hands and knees while I was waiting for more help and started pulling the dirt away from where his legs were. And I got far enough in there so that I could see him with my flashlight. And he was sitting in there smoking a cigarette.
Oh, no.
And why that didn't ignite all those fumes is a mystery to me.
Yeah.
I reached up and grabbed the cigarette out of his mouth in my hand and crushed it. "What are you doing that for?" And he had a few injuries, but nothing serious.
Right.
I said, "Can't you smell all these gas fumes?" "Yeah, I guess I do." We're lucky we're not frying right now.
That's right.
And we had got him out of there, and there was no fire. And after a while, the fume dissipated, and that was the end of the story. But it's just a miracle that there wasn't a huge ball of flame going up out of that little swale in the.
Yeah. And the sad thing is, if that would have happened, there would have been nobody left to tell the story.
Yeah. Well, they'd have figured it out, I'm sure.
Yeah. Guy lighting a cigarette was his last action in life.
Yeah. Yeah, that would have been a sad thing to have happen. But anyway.
You know, one of our favorite stories, I suppose, in school, at least most kids liked it, was the watermelon story. You remember that one?
Yeah, you want to hear that story?
Yeah, let's do that one.
Between State Street and Star, the little town out in the country, there's a long stretch of highway. And there's another highway that comes in from the south from Emmett, Idaho. And it's a T intersection. There's no crossroad. It's a T. And when you come into that, the people coming from the south have to stop and wait till the traffic's cleared before they can turn right or left to go down the Highway 44. Anyway, one night, late at night, 4 young people, 2 young guys and 2 young girls, they were all probably in the early 20s, were coming from Emmett, driving too fast, and they come to that intersection and they were not paying attention and they didn't stop, and they went shooting across that intersection. And the road that they were coming onto, Highway 44, had a little crown, like most roads do. Most paved highways are crowned a little, so the rainwater will run off of them. And that road was crowned a little. And they flipped, when they hit that crown of that road, they went airborne, and I measured it. They flew a little over 100 feet. I can't remember the exact, 105 feet or something, through the air before that car hit the ground again. And when it hit the ground, there was a dog there, and they hit the dog and just smeared him like a butter on the edge of your plate. And then the car sailed, hit the ground and bounced and went up in the air, and it knocked limbs out of a tree 12 feet up. I measured that too. And they missed the tree. They went beside the tree and knocked the limbs out, and then landed and over a canal, a little canal about 6 feet across, over the canal, and went out into the field at about a quarter of a mile.
Wow.
And it was a watermelon field. Used to grow a lot of watermelons or pumpkins. No, it was pumpkins. It was the fall of the year, and it was pumpkins. I got there and it was dark, but I didn't have any trouble seeing what was going on. This path of wreckage and debris scattered out through there. So I grabbed my light, and another backup was coming to help, and went out there, and I come to that little canal, and you could see it was only about 2 feet deep. So I waded through it to get out there, because you got to see if there's anybody still alive in this mess. Well, on the way there, I stumbled over something, and I thought it was just a pumpkin. Just kind of kicked something with my foot that was kind of heavy, and went kind of thunk, and I didn't think any more about it. Went on over to the wreckage. When I got to the wreckage, there was one guy that was obviously dead, and another guy who was obviously dead because his head was missing. His head was gone. And one of the girls was really banged up. And another girl she was sober. They were all drunk. This one girl wasn't so drunk that she didn't have brains enough. She was in the back seat, and she got down on the floor in the back. Was laying on the floor before the wreck happened. She couldn't get the driver to slow down. She told me later. Anyway, she came out of it with a few injuries, just enough to go to the hospital. I went into the hospital the next day to talk to her and get more details of what happened for my report. And she was able to talk. She was only in the hospital a day or two. The other girl was she died in the hospital. 2 guys dead at the scene. 1 girl died later. 1 girl lived. Probably still having nightmares about that to this day. Wreckage everywhere. And all because of too much speed. And I don't know how fast he was going, but he had to be going way over 100 to do all that damage and bounce along for a quarter of a mile out through a field of pumpkins. But back to the story then. I got looking around for the head that was missing. Missing was head. I got looking around for it, and I thought, goodness. And I shined the light down on my foot, and I had blood all over my foot. And I thought, that must be what I stumbled over. And I went back the direction I'd come running in there, looking around with my flashlight, and sure enough, I found the guy's head.
Interesting.
He got severed some way in the wreck, because by then the car had been flipping and rolling, and
Yeah.
severed his head. And so I gathered up the head and brought it over where the body was, and let the coroners take it from there. But terrible thing.
That's pretty tough. I guess this just goes to show what people will come upon if they are the first responders to a terrible accident.
Yeah.
It's not pretty most of the time, especially in a high-speed situation like that.
Well, speed kills. Just that simple. If you're going even if you're going under the speed limit, you can get killed in a car wreck.
Oh, yeah.
But when you're going 100 miles an hour, statistics back in those days, I don't know what the statistics are now, but in my day, statistics showed that when you're going 100 miles an hour, you have 10 minutes to live. 10 minutes. Because if you wreck at that speed, your chances of living are very, very slim. And after figuring all the wrecks and everything else, the estimate was 10 minutes left to live when you're going 100 miles an hour.
Yeah, that's crazy. And back in those days, they didn't have a lot of the safety features on cars that have increased the rates of living.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Still.
Yeah, in those days there weren't any airbags, and seat belts were not a requirement. A lot of people didn't have seat belts.
A lot of cars didn't even have seat belts. That was like what, 1958 or something when they started putting seat belts in.
I think so, around there somewhere. But
they were just put there as kind of a convenience. A lot of people would just cut them out of their car because they didn't know what they were.
They were a nuisance, and but it took a while and even today, there's some people who don't put their seatbelt on. When I get in the car, I put it on before I even start the car up.
Yeah.
Just from habit and things that I've seen and the experiences like I just told you about. None of them had seatbelts on.
Yeah.
And the girl that only lived because she had sense enough to get down on the floor and hug the floor.
Yeah. Well, speaking of speed, I've got a quick story. In Boise, I would have been about 4 years old, so it'd be about 1968, maybe 69. This guy came into our neighborhood one day, and you had worked the night shift before, so you were home asleep. Mom was probably up doing breakfast or ironing clothes or whatever she did. Mike and I were out playing. Brother Mike, were out playing, and this guy drove into our neighborhood in kind of a sporty little hot car. One of those little muscle cars. And he had a flat tire, and he asked us if our dad had a jack. So we ran home, grabbed the jack out of the garage, and went and let him use it. He changed his tire, and he asked us if we wanted to go for a ride in his car. We didn't know who this guy was. He was just some stranger. And we said yes. So we jumped in his car, and that highway, Federal Way, that went past our place there, or the turnoff. What's that, Federal Way?
Yeah, Federal Way.
He turned right, went just past that motel that was right there, and he counted the mileage. We got up to 105, according to him. Oh. He slowed down, did the U-turn, and headed back and dropped us off at our house. Said, "Thanks for letting me use your dad's jack," and left. Well, we were excited. We thought that was really neat. So we went in, and I don't know why Mom wasn't as excited as we were, but she gave us hell for getting in someone's car and driving fast. And as I recall, you woke up enough to overhear part of the story and came storming out of your bedroom, half asleep, in your underwear, wondering who we were riding with. And, I think back on that and other things like that, and I'm surprised we didn't end up disappeared somewhere.
Yeah, risky times.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you do that nowadays, there's probably only one reason the guy'd offer you a ride, and that's so he could steal you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well,
Dad, there's one story about you had to deal with a deceased person in their house that had been there for a while. And
oh, yeah. And you want to hear that one?
It's a sad story because the old feller died.
Yeah.
But the way the cleaners reacted to that, I think, is kind of humorous. Do you want to tell that story?
Yeah, I'll tell you the story. I got a call to go down to Garden City because this old guy died in his house, and it was in the summer. And Boise area gets up around 100 degrees for about 2 months every summer. And he was in there in all that heat. And I went up, and one of his neighbors went over to see him because he hadn't seen him out in the yard. He peeked through the window and saw him laying in there on the couch, obviously dead. So I went to check it out and went over and peeked in the window, and sure enough, there he was laying in on the couch, dead. And the reason I knew he was dead because he was bloated up like a cow does when it dies or any other animal. Humans do that too.
Right.
In the heat, they bloat. And he was about I don't know, huge, big old bloated thing with his arms sticking out and his feet sticking out. And the rest of it was just bloat. His shirt and his pants had already split open from, well, and we got in the house. I got some help. They came with a big rubber sheet, and this rubber sheet is like a sleeping bag kind of. You unzip it and open it up and put the body in it, zip it back shut, and that zips all of the whatever it is inside, so that it's sanitary. So we didn't know what to do, how to get all this body. One of the guys said, well, we laid this sheet out on the floor in front of the couch, and one of the medics that came to help get the body said, well, I'll pull him off. And he grabbed the hand and gave it a pull, and the hand came off like a glove.
Oh, boy.
That's how badly decomposed he was. The bone stayed, the hand came off, like taking off a glove. He threw that on the sheet, and he shook his hand. Oh, my goodness. And I said, well, listen, I'll go outside and we'll figure something out. So I went out and found a little board 2 or 3 feet long. And I brought it back in and I handed it to one of the guys. And I said, all right, just stick it down behind the body and pry it off onto the floor and it'll roll onto the sheet. So like a dummy, I was standing there. And sure enough, when he rolled off, the body burst open like a popping balloon.
Oh, boy.
And the mungus from the guy splashed all over my pant legs.
Oh, no.
And so I said, I got to go home and get another pair of pants on because this was terrible odor.
Yeah.
So I got in my car and went home and I drove up in the driveway and went out the garage and one of you kids were there. And I told you, go in and tell Mom to bring me another pair of uniform pants. And so she did. And I went in the garage and took that pair off and took everything off of it and rolled it up in a ball. And I'd also have her bring a plastic bag. So she brought the plastic bag. I put those smelly pants in that plastic bag and tied it shut and put my other uniform on and went out and washed my boots off with a hose and got it cleaned up. Took the dirty pants in the plastic bag down to the local laundry where we always got our cleaning done. And I set it up on the counter. And I said, I got a pair of uniform pants here for you to clean. And the guy said, okay. And he started untying it. And I said, no, don't untie it. I said, they smell really bad. I didn't give him all the details. I just said they got something on them that really stinks. Oh, okay. And he tied it back shut. And he took it back and threw it in the pile of laundry.
Oh, no.
And the guy back there didn't know this whole thing. And so when he come to that bag, he picked it up and looked at it. And he untied it and opened it up and stuck his head in to see what was in there. And that hit him in the face. And I was told later that he threw up for the rest of the day.
Oh, boy.
It was terrible. So it's kind of funny, that part of the story. But the unfunny part was the poor old guy died in there on his couch. And
well, I think it's
at least a couple of weeks in the hot.
It's important for people to understand that human beings, when they die, do just what any other flesh and blood carcass, I guess you would call it, would.
Yeah.
And it's not a pretty sight. And
it's not pretty.
Medical workers and police officers get involved in these things. You don't hear about them because nobody talks about them unless you're a friend or relative.
Yeah.
But these things happen fairly often.
Yeah, probably more often than most people realize. And, somebody dies somewhere and they lay there dead for a few days before they're discovered. And it doesn't take long, a few hours, and you immediately start to. Example, I'll tell you another quick story. Darrell Lee and I. Darrell Lee's one of my buddies, a fellow officer. We went on some big ones together. And Darrell was 6'5", weighed about 280 pounds, big guy. We got a call to go that a guy had died in his house, and the ambulance crew needed some help carrying the body. It was down a stairway, and the stairs came down the back, outside stairs, came down the back of the building and then made a landing and turned another direction around the corner of the building. And so Darrell and I volunteered to carry the guy. Well, Daryl, being big and strong, and stronger than me by far, they had him on a stretcher, and they wrapped a tent around him, a rubber sheet around him to keep him on the stretcher, and had him tied down. And of course, they had his clothes off because you have to do that, I guess. Anyway, we're coming down the stairs, and this guy had only been dead about 6-7 hours at the most. Died that morning. This was afternoon. And his daughter came over to see him and discovered his body. We were coming down the stairs, and Daryl was holding the bottom end of the stretcher like this, and I was up above holding it like this, and so that it stayed relatively level.
Yeah.
And we got just about to the landing, and the guy's bowels relieved, and all that stuff comes shooting down that tube because he was wrapped in a tube, and hit Daryl right in the chest.
Oh, no.
And he dropped that thing, and I set it down. And here, imagine this now. Here's this great big cop hanging over the side of the porch railing, throwing up. And here's another cop sitting there with his head in his hands laughing. Here's a dead guy. And,
situations like that, nobody would understand unless you were right there doing it.
Yeah.
Involved.
Yeah. Finally, we got our wits about us, and I went down and got a garden hose, and I washed Daryl off as well as we could, and got the guy loaded into the ambulance. And we figured out later why the ambulance crew didn't want to carry him down the stairs.
Right.
Yeah. Well, anyway.
They had it all figured out.
Yeah. Get these cops to do this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That same Daryl Lee, one time he stopped the violator down on Highway 20, and there was a big canal right beside the highway. No fence or anything, just a big canal there. And Daryl, you get to picture this now, had a violator. Violator is somebody who was breaking the law, and you have to give him a ticket. Had him on the side of the road, and he put your police car up behind him with the lights going and everything. And Daryl gets out of his car, and he has his ticket book in his hand, and he comes walking up there to this guy's car. And all the time he's trying to talk to the guy's kind of chuckling and kind of giggling. And what's so funny, he thought, but he let it go. And anyway, but he said, let me have your driver's license. And the guy said, well, okay, but before I give it to you, you might want to look back there. And then Daryl turned and looked back. What he'd done, instead of getting his car in park, he got it in reverse and it backed into the canal. So this guy'd sit there watching in the mirror while the police car backed into the canal. And Daryl run back there to look at his car, and the guy spun